Welcome to another edition of the Five Star Zone. Rico Beard, Senior Research Manager, Harold Shelton, joining me. Harold, let me just first off say congratulations. You picked the winner. I picked the loser. And this is even before we knew the games were going to be played, but I took Purdue. You took Yukon. They met in the championship game. Yukon's a machine, man. I haven't seen a team that dominant in a long time where it's the magical number was 23. Once you got tied with them at 23, they just blew your doors off. Ask Illinois, ask Purdue. I mean, you can hang a banner, I guess, if you're Alabama and say we had the lead over them for a little bit of the game, but that's about it, man. UConn wins it all. What makes them so much different than everybody else?
So I think, for one, the best offense in the country in terms of efficiency is, and they're not a team that runs up and down a lot, but when they do it when they want to, and they usually get a really easy bucket out of it. I think they're just really good in terms of all of the movement they do off the ball. You don't really see a ton of screen and roll. You don't really see a ton of ISO. It's a bunch of guys who just know how to play, and whether that's Tristan Newton, cutting to the basket. You see Klingon dropping the dime to him for layups, whether it's Cam Spencer, coming off a curl, catch and shoot. Obviously, you can dump it into the big fella if you having some issues scoring. So I just think they have so many weapons. There's just so many questions that they present, and there's just not enough answers for anybody to solve them. And so I think UConn has just been, they've been that good for the last couple of years, and I give Dan Hurley a ton of credit because they had a few struggles when he first got there, missing the tournament. Then when they get to the tournament, they lost in the first round a couple times. And he said, these rock fights aren't for me. I got to figure out a way for us to be better offensively. Definitely went with much more movement, and obviously getting some lottery picks like Stephon Castle certainly helps too. They just had a ton of length all over the place. Completely frustrated Purdue, took them out of anything they wanted to do. Let Edie eat, shut the water off on everybody else, and you see they didn't have any airspace to shoot. They only took 7 threes for the game.
Yeah, they only made one. that was it with Smith. I look at the Purdue team. I'm going to take this in two spots. Purdue, I thought maybe could be that first Big Ten team to win a title in 24 years. They weren't. I thought Edie was going to be that difference maker. He was, but he wasn't. They as you said, I like how you put that. We're going to let him eat. We're shutting the water off on everybody else. You will be out there on your own. And that's literally what it was. Edie finishes with 37 points, I think, but it wasn't enough because his team did not help him out. Everybody who contributed throughout the entire year, I guess I'm trying to think that I don't even know if Fletcher Loyer even scored a point in that game. It was pretty bad. When you look at what Purdue did, they had a formula. Matt Painter's probably going to roll it back out there. I saw they got another 7-foot kid, 7'2". They're waiting on him. He's going to be the next. I'm just assuming because they've had a 7-foot guy, I think, going back to 2012. They haven't missed a beat. If you're Purdue, you're going to be the best team in the Big Ten next year. Odds-on favorite to win the conference. But looking at the bigger picture, Harold, what's the Big Ten have to do? 24 years. I mean, I didn't realize that when I was at the title game in 2000, I would be watching the last time. Now they made the title game. I think this is like either the 7th or 8th time they made the title game, but they've lost. What does the Big Ten have to do to break through that threshold? Because if the Big Ten was collective, was a team, we would be talking about firing the coach because you can't win the big one. If you think about that.
No, that's fair. It's weird because it seems like a lot of times when other leagues get to the title game, they wind up getting a San Diego State, they get a Butler, they get somebody like that, somebody who wasn't supposed to be there. And once they get there, clock strikes midnight, Cinderella's done. For whatever reason, the Big Ten has won the bad timing award in that every time they get to the title game, it's a juggernaut waiting for them once they get there. And you can go back to Indiana in '02, where they had to see Juan Dixon, Steve Blake, Chris Wilcox, You can go to Illinois when they had to face Raymond Felton, Sean May, Rashad McCants, Marvin Williams. Like if you go on, there's minimum 3 pros on every single team that they face, and they face the number 1 seed every single time they've gotten to the title game. Now, again, the problem is you haven't had enough pros yourself to compete with, the team, these number 1 seeds that have the 3 to 4 to 5 pros that the North Carolinas have had, the Villanovas have had, the Yukons have had. And so I think you need more wings. The way that things are going now, it's great to have a big man, but the big man can only do so much, as we saw on Monday. You got to get guys that can create their own shot. You got to have guys who are athletic enough to make plays off the ball. You got to, be able to just get a stop on your own, keep guys out of the lane. And the Big Ten just doesn't have enough of that. I think for a long time, there were good point guards. We saw Trey Burke, we saw Cassius Winston, we saw Darren Williams, but there haven't been enough wings, I think, to complement that. And a lot of these teams that you're seeing that they've lost to, whether it's a Mikal Bridges, a Dante DiVincenzo, Stephon Castle, Cam Spencer, you can go on and on and on. They're the ones that have a ton of length, a ton of athleticism. And so you might be fine at the 1 and you might be fine at the 5, but that 2, 3, 4 is usually an issue for these Big Ten teams.
So is that the thing? Is that the issue? You just got to supplement your shooting guard and your wings because I got to think if it was that easy in 24 years, somebody would have figured that out. I mean, I'm not trying to shoot. It just seems like, man, what is the deal? Now, I like how you put that with the stats, and that's why I love having you on. I didn't realize they all played 1 seeds. And yeah, unfortunately, I think the Big Ten has turned into the Cinderella where the clock strikes midnight on that Monday and you're done. You're toast. I just never thought that we still would be talking about Mateen Cleaves was leading a team to a championship, especially because his son is about to be playing college hoops in a few years. You would have just the law of averages would have said that the Big Ten would have won at least 1. You look at almost the same time frame since '99. UConn's won 6 titles. Big Ten 1. UConn's become a new dynasty. We'll get to that in a minute, but I just wonder, like, man, if it's that simple, like, how come the other teams can't do it? Now, if I had to pick one, I had said on my show, I think it's Illinois would probably be the team that breaks through first. Looking at what Underwood is trying to build, I think the only thing that held him back was depth. And you saw they were giving UConn a battle for a little bit. It was tied up, and then UConn went on a 30-0 run. It was just the depth that UConn had that Illinois didn't. He's going out there. He's trying to bring in players. I don't know if it's official that AJ Storrs is jumping ship from Wisconsin to Illinois, but it looks that way that it's going to happen. Like, he's trying to put together those wing players that you're saying. That's the one. But I look at the other styles, and it's almost as if the Big Ten is married, and they're going to do it to they're going to win using a certain style. And we're not going to change this style. And it's almost like the old lady at a slot machine who has a system. And I'm going to keep doing this system to this machine. Eventually pays off. It's like, no, maybe you need to switch things up, because I don't see Purdue changing things that much. I don't see Michigan State changing things that much. Ohio State with a new coach, maybe, but he still came up in that same program. I don't see them doing changes. Like, Iowa was the only team that I knew was different. Iowa was like all offense, no defense, first team to 85 wins, but that doesn't take you anywhere because you do have to be able to shut teams down. I look at the teams in the Big Ten, and I don't know. Like, Rutgers is now going to have a bunch of 5-stars and superstars next year. Is that going to be enough to get them over the hump? I'm perplexed. I don't know. It's not fun. If you're a Big Ten fan, you watch every other conference. And it's not just Duke and North Carolina and Kansas. Like I said, UConn is now a blue blood. And honestly, if you want to be real about it, in case you were even thinking that MSU was a blue blood, they replaced them and said, okay, let's put all our titles on the table. That's a nice 1 that you have. Here's 6. We're in. Yeah, I look at this and I don't know if you're a fan of the Big Ten, how long you gotta wait before you finally see your team, because it's gotten to the point now where I think the Big Ten would just rather see somebody, even if it ain't your favorite team, it could be your arch rivals. You just want to see somebody win so you could lose that stigma of, yeah, the bridesmaid, never the bride.
Yeah, and I think the craziest thing about it too is in that stretch, there's been 7 different Big Ten teams. Not 7 times total, 7 different teams that have gotten there. So it's not like, the ACC where it's usually Carolina, Duke, or the Big East where it's Yukon, Nova, or the Big 12 where it's Baylor, Kansas. Like you had Indiana, Illinois, Michigan State, Michigan a couple of times, Purdue now, like Wisconsin. You've had 7 different teams get there, and for whatever reason, like they just can't kick the door in, and it's really interesting. And the UConn point, in terms of blue bloods, I don't think you can argue it now. I think for me, the way that I've looked at it is that there were, at least before 2 years ago, there were 4 blue bloods to me. And it was in some order: Kentucky, Kansas, North Carolina, Duke. I think UConn has to be right in there. You got 6 titles. That's more than Duke now. So like you gotta be in that mix.
I
I
mean, if
think,
you look at recent blue bloods, Kentucky,
yeah,
I didn't realize how long it's been since they won a title.
yeah,
And
2012 and
now,
only one Final Four since then.
right now, they're losing in the first weekend. Like, okay, yeah, I mean, you saw so much. Calipari just said, you know what, it may be a good time just to walk away.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to do this anymore. But I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no worries. So I view those 5 as kind of at a level above themselves. I think right below them, you have Indiana, UCLA off of the history. You have 11 titles for UCLA. You have 5 for Indiana, but Indiana's got what, one Final Four in 30 years. UCLA has got one title in 55, 60 years. So it's hard for me to put them still in that same stratosphere. It seems like everything kind of happened in one window, one period of time, not a consistent thing. And I think after that, there's like a tier where it's Villanova, Louisville, and Michigan State kind of rounding out that top 10. But it seems like there's a big gap between those 5 at the top and those 3 that round out the top 10 where Michigan State currently falls. And I think if you would have asked that question 5 years ago, they might have been a little closer to that top level. But the way things have gone, and that kind of goes for the rest of the Big Ten. Recruiting's got to get better. You got to be with the times, as we saw with this tournament. The number 1, 2, and 3 teams in offensive efficiency all got to the Final Four. The number 4 team was Illinois, who lost to the champion and got to the Elite Eight to get there. These rock fights are not going to work in this day and age. Like, I get it, in the Big Ten, you might have to play a little more physical, but teams that get up and down, they are the ones that are winning right now. And
See, that's why I
so,
said, to me, Illinois is a team that I think can break through. They just happen to play UConn. And I mean, whether if you would have flopped them in Purdue, it would have been the same. They would have just lost in the title game and they would have broke our hearts instead of Purdue. But yeah, you're right. I think for the Big Ten, you got to get away from the style of play, the methodical first team, the 60 wins. And you got to bump that up to, first team to 75 wins. You don't have to go full Iowa. But Harold, I do agree with you. You got to be able to put points on the board. And I think even with that, you're going to draw better recruits and better talent because now it's fun rather than just because sometimes, man, some of these games I always equated to, getting a root canal. Like you got to do it. Like you got to play Wisconsin and you like with a root canal, you're happy when it's over. Nothing about it was enjoyable. It was painful. You didn't want to be there. You tried to distract yourself. But that's unfortunately a lot of Big Ten games where you look at them and it's first team to 60 normally ends up winning. You got to be able to score more. You got to make this league, this conference fun again. And I think maybe you will attract more people because, we're in a day now where it's funny because it used to be all about the one and dones and can you attract them for at least 1 year. But now when you look at it, you got people who are here for 4 or 5, 6 years veteran teams are taking over. I don't know how you build a championship team anymore. I really don't. I mean, I guess everybody can pattern and look at what Yukon did. You kind of mix all of them in there. But it used to be, the Kentucky way was I'm just going to get the most NBA talent and see if you can hang with these guys. And hopefully within that short season, they can gel together. I don't know how do you build a championship team?
Well, it's funny because if you look at the Final Four, it was kind of all over the map. Like you had NC State, whose whole starting five were transfers. You had Alabama, who I think had 9 new players total. You had Purdue, who pretty much was a homegrown team that just added one guy and Lance Jones. And then I think you had UConn that had a mix of both, where there were guys that were back from last year in terms of Newton and Klingon, but then they added a couple pieces with Spencer in the portal. Then they added Stephon Castle as a McDonald's All-American. So they had a nice mix of vets. Then they added a young talent. Then they added an experienced shooter. So I feel like the Yukon way, and obviously it's going to be easier said than done, where you have enough guys who are old, you saw a hole, you plug that hole with a veteran, and then you wind up bringing in a couple of young, talented guys to push the vets in front of you. And then those vets can go ahead and teach those young guys what the culture is here, how you're supposed to play, how you're supposed to win. Hurley certainly seems to have this thing figured out, and I can fully appreciate how he's approached this whole thing because he's big on I'm gonna coach my guys hard. Like you have to live
Even
up
in the
to the
game, if
standard.
you're not running the play, I'm going to go on the court and push you.
What was so funny about that too is you saw the timeout happen. Spencer comes over to Hurley and he's like, "Hey, did I push you?" And Spencer's like, "I don't know." And
Right.
so then he immediately starts yelling at the ref. He's so locked in, he didn't even realize that he did it. Like he was so hyper focused on the task at hand. And I just think he's really built something really special there. And the fact that he's got all of these guys to buy in, and he's got, I'm gonna coach it the hard way. I know a lot of coaches are like, I don't know how I can coach my kids. I'm worried about guys leaving and all of this stuff. And he's like, look, this is what it's gonna be. If you come here, I'm gonna coach you hard. I'm gonna make sure I vet the parents first to see what their best interest is. If it's a guy that's gone to like 4 or 5 different high schools, he might not be the guy for us. And so, their process in terms of vetting everything early and letting you know what it is and still having the results at the end, hopefully that allows coaches to coach their kids hard because I just feel like that's gone away. And I think a lot of people are just so worried about the backlash of, oh, if I coach this guy hard, I might not get more recruits to come to me. And the guys that I have might leave. At the end of the
What's,
day, they want to get success and want to get to the league. And coaching them
what's,
hard does that. Then what's the problem?
now, Harold, it's funny you say that because I was talking to Izzo the other day. He was down for Mark Montgomery is now his assistant coach is now the new head coach at UD Mercy, and he was saying just that of how I got to go back to doing me. This whole I can't sit here and coddle players. I got to go back and coach the way I know how to coach. And I got to go back to being that guy and pushing players and trying to get the most out of them. And he was like, yeah, I mean, if it doesn't work, then I guess I'll just walk away. But yeah, it's one of those where you try to play the game, but the game ends up playing you. Where the guys like the Hurleys are just like, you know what? If you don't like it, don't come here. That
Yep.
whole Bob Knight mentality of, yes, I'm going to yell at your kid and I may throw some stuff at them. Doesn't mean I don't like them. Doesn't mean I can't teach them. It just means they did something stupid at the moment and I got pissed off at them. So we'll see. Now, I do want to ask because if I would have told anybody, I don't even know if you could put odds on this in Vegas, but back in September when I was doing the shows with Howard, that at the end of football and basketball, Alabama and Kentucky would both have brand new coaches. Nobody would have believed that.
Mm-mm.
But Bama goes out, gets Kalen DeBoer, they get him from Washington. He was just coaching, I think, at Fresno State 2 or 3 years before. Like, he doesn't have this long track record. Kentucky hoops. They get embarrassed by Oakland University, local team here in the state of Michigan. They're not in California, folks. If you're watching this, they're here in Rochester Hills. Greg Campy and the Golden Grizzlies. Oakland beats Kentucky, and you knew this wasn't going to sit well with them. I think this is one where they could have lost to a team. They could have lost to an Illinois. They could have lost to a Purdue. They could have lost to a Michigan State. They could have lost to a top team, and I think you could have shrugged it off. You lost to Oakland, where most people are like, it's something when you lose to a school and you have no idea what a school is. It's like I remember the year when Michigan lost to NJIT, and I'm like, I've never heard of this school before. When you got to Google the school, it hurts even more. And I think that's what happened to Kentucky fans. Now, they go out there and they're trying to find coaches. It looks like they finally got their coach, BYU's coach, Coach Pope. But I don't think Kentucky saw that people were going to turn them down, especially Scott Drew. I didn't realize that Drew had been at Baylor for 20 years. It seems like he was just at Valpo a few years ago, but I was like, wow, he has been there for 20 years. He's built a life. Family loves it, won a title. Yeah, he's not, why would he go to Kentucky? Because I got to think with Kentucky, great program, great history, crazy fans. Why would I want to put up with these fans? And I think that's what turned off a lot of coaches to go to Kentucky.
No, I agree. And I feel like at this day and age, if I've built something somewhere, the money being what it is, like why would I have to leave? Like if I'm Nate Oates, I took Alabama to the Final Four for the first time. I've got great, money and I've got great NIL situation. Why would I leave that where I'm the king to go to a place where if we don't win the national title, it's considered a disappointment every year? Like it just doesn't make sense. And so I think, the times have changed where you've gone from, oh, this job is so great. I would leave wherever I'm at to make sure I get this job. You can win at a lot of places. Like
Okay.
you can win at Baylor.
I thought Dan Hurley was going to be there. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? If you're Kentucky, you just say, you know what, Hurley, here's a blank check, fill out the amount, tell us how much you want. You come here. But he was preemptive and said, yeah, my wife ain't going to let this happen. I'm good here. I'm winning here. I plan on winning the third title in a row. It was just weird seeing guys just telling Kentucky, nah, thank you, but I'm good. I got a feeling, just like in football, I don't think Bama fans, like it's all good. You're in your honeymoon period with the new coach, which Coach DeBoer. I don't think that's going to work out because I think Bama fans, very short leash. I think the same, if Kentucky ends up bringing in Pope, I think the same thing because you're Kentucky. You expected, Greg Popovich type of a coach to come in there. And it's like, well, who is it? Wait, we had to go to BYU to get a coach? How long you think that, I guess how short of a runway does Coach Pope have before they just say, yeah, we got to do better than this?
That's a good question. I think what might help him is that he played there. He was on the '96 championship team with Patino, so I feel like he gets a lot of love there. I'll be curious on his coaching situation, and I know it's BYU, so it's harder to get guys out there. But I've never known him to be, this great recruiter where he's able to get these top 100 kids to come in. It's usually a lot of older players, but maybe that's something that he can parlay into at Kentucky because, as we saw, the one and dones weren't working there. So
Right.
maybe if he's just doing a better job of getting some of the transfers to come in, maybe because he was, coaching at least before this year, when I say moved up to the Big 12, when he was in the West Coast Conference, he had to get guys who have smaller profiles. So maybe he knows what those type of guys would look like in that area, can come up to Kentucky and help them compete. Offensively, they should be fine. I mean, they're a team that likes to shoot a ton of threes, which should fit with today's modern game. And it's hard to say just with the expectations, just because we've seen them run a guy out in Cal who, had multiple Final Fours, had a title, but it's so what have you done for me lately? And no
I mean, I
Final
just
Four since
wonder because
2015.
I look at Duke and I got to think that next year, if they don't do anything, Shire's going to start feeling the heat. Like you were handed the keys, you were the heir apparent, and we're Duke. And, I'm thinking to me, if Duke's not in the Final Four, you're going to hear a lot of people saying maybe we made a mistake with John Shire. And he was on the staff. He was there. Like Coach K anointed him. This wasn't an anointing. That's why, even though he played with them, I just wonder, does he get like 3 years? And if you're not in a Final Four, not even a title, but if you're not in the Final Four, what are we doing? Or is he a placeholder where when the next best coach becomes available, it's kind of like, okay, here's your severance check. You can pack your bags and we can go ahead and go after this guy.
Yeah, I can see the latter playing out that way. I feel like Billy Gillispie was like that once he left the A&M job to go there. And like they were fine. They weren't great by any stretch. And he was only there for a few years. And it was like, okay, this is fine, but we can go get Coach Cal now and we'll send you on your way. Thank you for your services. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was something like that. I feel like it's maybe a low floor kind of situation where it's, we'll bring you in, kind of see what happens. If it works out, great, because you're one of us and we can love you. But at the end of the day, we're trying to hang banners. And if after year 3 or 4, it looks like we're not even heading in that direction, then we got to figure something else out. But I'd be curious to see what his portal strategy is, because it didn't really seem like Cal relied on it as much. Again, that was mostly a one and done thing. Let me just try to get the best McDonald's guys in here, get them to the league, which he was so proud of. Just, you come here, I can get you to the league. And that's great.
Like at some point, he had 40% of the NBA that went to
Yep.
him.
But Kentucky fans don't care. They see we had all these dudes and we got one national title in 15 years. Like, what happened? So.
All right. So one last thing, and then I'll let you go. By the way, I appreciate all your help throughout the college hoop season.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Let's we saw the way too early stuff. Give me your way too early top 4 in the Big Ten next year.
Ooh, that's
I'm not gonna hold you to this, but just as of right now, who's gonna finish 1 through 4? Who's gonna get the double buys in the Big Ten tournament?
Ooh, man, that's a really good question. It's so much. It's so much.
You at the Big Ten? Have they said where the tournament's gonna be next year?
I haven't heard a word. I've heard the rumors of Indy and Chicago, getting it the next 2 years, but don't know anything. Don't know if that's true or not. It seems to make the most sense if those, go back to your home base. Right. But I know Detroit has certainly expressed a lot of interest, so I hope that they get one at some point these next 4 years. But in terms of top 4, ooh, it's gonna be tough. I'm gonna give Illinois the benefit of the doubt, just because I've seen them turn over the roster a ton in the past. They seem to always, get high quality transfers in, and they've been the best team in the Big Ten the last 4 or 5 years in terms of most amount of wins. So I'm gonna put them in that mix. I think Matt Painter is too good of a coach to not put him in that mix. I mean, we saw them basically go to a post offense when they had Edey, but before that, when it was Carson Edwards, they built it around him. So I feel like he's a coach that does a good job of building around his strengths. So I give him the benefit of the doubt there. Trying to think after that.
Who's one that I'm always hesitant not to include them in the top 4 is Wisconsin, because Wisconsin is kind of like gum on the shoe. They don't go away. You can't get rid of them just when you think, oh, they don't have a team, and there they are, number 4 seed in the tournament. I don't know. Losing AJ Storr hurts. I don't know who's gonna be that scorer for them. But I'm always hesitant not to put them in there.
Yeah.
Does Ohio State keep the run how they finished the season off? Could you put them in there?
So I was getting ready to, then I saw they had a couple guys enter the portal. And so, I thought, Roddy Gale going in was interesting. Scotty Middleton going in was interesting. They still have some really good pieces there, but you lose Jamison Battle. You had 3 guys going to portal along with Zed Key. So the way that they were playing toward the end, I thought, that might be enough to kind of push them over with the young talent. But the way that they've lost guys and haven't really replaced them yet, it's hard to say. But I think they'll be in that mix. I think depending on what happens with the portal, Michigan State could be in that mix. Sounds like they're being very active in terms of trying to find a wing. Seems like they're linked to 3 or 4 guys.
As we speak now, he flew in Thursday night. He's going to be announcing, I think, on Monday. So yeah, they're very active. You got Trey Townsend, the kid from Oakland. They're in the mix for him. So they are. I think Izzo's going to be very aggressive when they try to bring in at least 1 to 2 more wing players So I can see MSU in that mix as well in that top four. But what about Rutgers? Rutgers bringing in all the stars.
I was gonna say Rutgers and Indiana, I think are probably my two wild cards there. I know Indiana lost Khalil Ware, but Mackenzie Mbako's back, Malik Renew's back. Uh, they're in the portal all the time. They also picked up 5-star Bryson Tucker, who was linked between Kansas and Michigan State and Indiana, kind of swooped in and got him out of nowhere. So, the way that they finished last year, I think Galloway's back too. So I could definitely see Indiana being in that mix. And Rutgers is going to be really interesting. I know they lost, the big man, Cliff Amori, but with the 2 5-star freshmen coming in, and then they got the Eastern transfer Tyson Acuff, who's averaging 20 something a game there. I mean, they certainly needed some scoring because they they really really struggled in that department. But I think Rutgers is a team now offensively, like they didn't have the shooters, but they wanted to play fast. They
Right.
just didn't have the guys to do it. But now, if you're adding a couple of McDonald's guys, you're adding a 20-point scorer. That home court advantage has been great for them. So I could definitely see Rutgers, fighting for the double bye. They should be a tournament team if those 5 stars live up to the hype.
What about some of our new neighbors from the Pac-12?
So Dana Altman's a great coach. He's another guy that uses the portal well. I wouldn't be shocked if Oregon made a late run. And they probably would have been better this year if their big guy, Dante, didn't get hurt. It wasn't until he got healthy that they were able to make
Yeah,
that run toward the end of the
he was a
season.
difference maker.
Yeah, big time. And they should have beat Creighton. They should have got to the Sweet 16. So, I mean, they were right there. USC, I mean, who knows? Musselman going out there will make them very interesting. That's a guy who can recruit
See,
really
I put
well.
USC with Michigan as two teams that really kind of literally hit the reset button.
Yep.
Expectations are going to be low. If you exceed them, great. But I don't think anybody expects either one of those two schools to do anything with the coaching changes.
Yeah, not that gotta agree with that. Especially with Michigan. I think I'd be curious if any of the FAU guys join him. I think the dead period is going to be over here pretty soon, so I wouldn't be
I think
shocked
the
if he
big
started.
fella, the
Golden.
yeah, the 7-footer.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think he. If I had to put money down, I think he joins the team.
Because I saw he left. John L. Davis, the good guard they had, he's in the portal too. I don't know if he's following him up or not. But I think Dusty May can coach, and I think he's a guy in terms of like the offense and trying to get up and down. Like he'll bring that style in. So getting more coaches that force you to play faster and force you to score, I think is going to be helpful for the Big Ten. So adding the 4 Pac-12 schools plus adding a guy like Dusty May, pretty much all those guys have offensive backgrounds outside of Mick Cronin at UCLA. So I think that'll help the overall conference.
So you got Purdue, you got Illinois. I need 2 more.
I'm gonna go Indiana, and I'm gonna go. I'll go Michigan State.
All right. So Purdue, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan State. Not necessarily in that order, but those are the 4 for next year. In the way too early. I like that. All right, El, I appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much for all your basketball knowledge because you would bring the facts, you bring the numbers, and I think it's funny because people would come up to me whenever AJ would shoot a jumper and be like, no, he only hits them from the corner. That's my man Harold. He came up with that stat. I didn't. So I appreciate it.
Hey, they listening, so that's a good thing.
They do, man. They listen and they watch. So I appreciate that, Harold. We'll have you back on. Maybe if something big happens over the summer, hoops wise. But man, I appreciate all your time this hoop season, and I'm sure the listeners and followers enjoy you as well. I'm Rico Beer for Harold Sheldon. Thanks for watching the 5-Star Zone. I'll be back next week talking some spring football. Unless you want to get in on spring football, because Howard lazy.
Hey, let me know. I cover football and basketball. It's all good.
Okay, well, you know what? We may be back. We may be running him back, folks. he may be coming back for 1 more year. He's going to use that COVID year. He'll appreciate your time. Thanks for listening and watching the 5-Star Zone.